They said it was impossible. Suicide. Any man who faced this would be dead in seconds. But on January 29th, 1945, Leonard Funk did the unthinkable. 4 of his men were helpless. 80 German prisoners were suddenly armed. 90 enemies all around him. A German officer slammed an MP-40 into Funk's stomach. 1 man against an army. The rules of war said surrender. Funk laughed instead. The Germans froze. Confused. Furious. Unprepared for what came next. In less than a minute, chaos became weaponized. Bullets flew. Soldiers fell. Orders vanished in the snow. When it was over, 21 Germans lay dead, dozens surrendered, and Leonard Funk became a legend. Origins and early life. Leonard Funk, before the war. August 27, 1916. Braddock Township, Pennsylvania, a small steel town hugging the Monongahela River. Smokestacks belched a constant gray haze, and the clang of foundries never truly stopped. In this industrial maze of grit and iron, Leonard Alfred Funk Jr. was born, the second child of a working-class family. Life here wasn't easy. It demanded resilience before you even learned to tie your shoes. By the time Leonard could walk without tripping over coal and gravel, he was already learning responsibility. His parents leaned on him to help care for his younger siblings, to carry messages, to run errands in streets with a clang of machinery mixed with the cries of laborers. He grew fast. Not just in body, he would always be a modest 5 feet 5 inches and 140 pounds. But in mind and character, Funk absorbed lessons from a hard world. That courage isn't flashy, it's reliable. That doing the right thing often means doing the hardest thing. The Great Depression struck when Funk was still a teenager. By 1934, he had graduated from high school, but college was a fantasy, and jobs were almost non-existent. Factories favored the experienced, and towns like Braddock were unforgiving to those who could not carry their weight. Leonard found work wherever he could, clerking at local stores, running errands, shoveling coal. He learned to measure risk and value every opportunity. In those long, gray days, the foundations of his character solidified. Patience under pressure, quiet observation, and a fierce sense of responsibility for those smaller or weaker than himself. June 1941. The war across Europe was raging, and across the oceans, America was watching cautiously. Congress extended the draft. Leonard Funk's number came up. He reported to the induction center in Willingsburg, Pennsylvania, at the age of 24. The Army physical examiner likely saw a small, lean man, fit enough but seemingly built for clerical work, maybe office duty far from the chaos of the front lines. They couldn't have been more wrong. Funk didn't wait for fate to decide. He volunteered for the paratroopers, a force that barely existed. This force asked men to leap from perfectly good airplanes, to descend into enemy territory, to fight surrounded, often alone. Suicide, most called it. But Funk had already learned that survival was about courage and thinking, not size or luck. He embraced the grueling training. 5 weeks of running, jumping, climbing, falling, and conditioning that broke men physically and mentally. Half of the candidates washed out before they even reached the jump towers. Funk endured because he had learned to endure. And then came the jumps. First from a tower, then from a moving plane at 1,200 feet. The wind tore at his face, and his heart pounded like a hammer on iron. Each step over the open door was a defiance of instinct. Yet, when he landed, legs aching, face bruised, body screaming in protest, he rose. This was Leonard Funk. Calm in chaos, steadfast under stress. His parachute tangled with the trees, waterlogged fields, and enemy territory, but he survived. Each jump, each drill, each grueling march hardened him further. Assigned to Company C, 1st Battalion, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment at Camp Blanding, Florida, Funk was a recruit among hardened veterans of Sicily and Italy. Most of his squad mates were barely 20 years old, untested in the way Funk's life had already shaped him. At 27, he seemed ancient to them, but he had something far beyond age or strength, a quiet authority that made men follow him into the unknown, even when they were scared. Competence, calm, and courage. These were the weapons Funk carried, long before he ever held a rifle. By the time Funk boarded the ship for England in late 1943, the foundations were set. He was no longer just a clerk from Pennsylvania. He was a paratrooper. He was ready to leap into the chaos of history. What he didn't know yet was that the war would test not just his body, but his mind, his ethics, and his unshakable resolve. He was about to face moments that would define him forever, not for fame, not for glory, but because he could think clearly when everyone else froze, because he would act when hesitation meant death. And so Leonard Funk, small in stature but vast in determination, prepared for a war that would ask everything of him. And he would give it, without complaint, without pause, and without ever surrendering his humanity. D-Day and the chaos of Normandy. Funk behind enemy lines. June 6, 1944. The sky above Normandy was dark, pierced by tracer fire and the distant rumble of artillery. Leonard Funk, 27 years old, stood in the stick of AC-47 Skitran, clutching his M1A1 Thompson submachine gun, 60 pounds of equipment strapped to his body, ammunition, grenades, rations, medical kit. He could feel the vibrations of the aircraft, hear the metal shudder as flak shells exploded around them. The pilots were low, only 400 feet above the ground. Too low for a safe jump, but climbing was an option. Below, Germany's Atlantic Wall waited, bristling with guns, bunkers, and deadly intent. The green light flickered. Funk leapt. The blast of propeller hit him like a freight train. For a moment, time stopped. Wind tore at his uniform, his body twisting violently in the free fall. Below, France stretched out like a battlefield painting. Flooded fields, villages, forests, and enemy positions everywhere. The world narrowed to the simple equation of survival. Land, cut yourself free. Fight. Impact. His ankle twisted sharply, a pain so intense it stole his breath. He grimaced, forcing himself to move. The parachute tangled in a tree, dragging him sideways through ice-cold water. Men around him screamed. Some never freed themselves in time. Funk wrenched himself free and began gathering scattered paratroopers. By nightfall, he had assembled 18 men from different companies, all lost, all scared, all relying on him. He was their anchor, their leader. For 10 days, Funk led this disparate group behind enemy lines, 40 miles through German-held territory. Each night they moved, each day they hid. Every step was measured, calculated, and dangerous. He scouted ahead despite his sprained ankle, putting himself in the most perilous positions to protect his men. When encounters came, they fought with precision. Funk's leadership turned ordinary soldiers into a cohesive unit. Every night, he kept morale high. Every day, he kept them alive. By June 17th, Funk had led all 18 men back to Allied lines. Every single one survived. Not a single casualty. It was a feat that would earn him the Silver Star, plus a Bronze Star and his first Purple Heart. But Funk didn't bask in glory. There was no time. Europe was still a continent at war, and the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment still had missions to complete. September 17, 1944. Holland, Operation Market Garden. The largest airborne assault in history. 35,000 paratroopers, British, American, and Polish, dropping behind enemy lines to capture bridges across 64 miles of Dutch territory. The plan was ambitious. Strike quickly, hold the bridges, and allow ground forces to advance into Germany by Christmas. Chaos awaited. Funk's unit landed near Nijmegen, encountering scattered German resistance. His Company C secured objectives, but the battlefield was fluid and unpredictable. Funk noticed a critical threat. 3 German 20mm flak anti-aircraft guns, dug in on high ground near Vauxhall, poised to destroy incoming Allied gliders carrying reinforcements. Standard doctrine dictated a 3:1 advantage to assault such positions. Funk had the opposite, outnumbered 7-1, but he didn't hesitate. Leading from the front, Funk and a 3-man patrol stormed the positions, neutralizing the security team and capturing the guns. The flak went silent. Reinforcements landed safely. For this, Funk was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest decoration for valor in the U.S. Army. Each of these moments demonstrated Funk's unshakable clarity under pressure. He acted decisively when others would freeze. He prioritized the lives of his men over his own safety. Every award, every medal, every citation tells the same story. Funk didn't just survive combat, he mastered it. He turned chaos into order, danger into opportunity. And yet, the war was far from over. Funk would soon face the Battle of the Bulge, the Normandy massacre, and challenges that would test his resolve, his ethics, and his courage in ways even Normandy and Market Garden could not. The Bulge, Normandy, and the hardening of Funk. December 16th, 1944. The Ardennes Forest. Cold, dark, relentless. The Germans launched their last desperate gamble. 3 armies, 400,000 men, 1,400 tanks, and 1,900 artillery pieces smashing through thinly held Allied lines. It was Hitler's final offensive in the West, designed to split the Allied forces, capture Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. For the Americans, it was a nightmare. Exhausted veterans were pulled from the line to plug gaps. Green troops, barely trained, froze in the icy chaos. Entire divisions crumbled under the German onslaught. Snow fell in thick sheets, masking movement, hiding the deadly advance of SS Panzer units. Temperatures dropped well below zero. Men froze in foxholes, weapons jammed, vehicles refused to start. The cold was as deadly as the bullets. Hunger, fatigue, and fear pressed on every soldier. Funk's 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment was ordered forward to hold and counterattack when possible. Funk's men were weary, but they had seen what he could do. They trusted him. December 17th, 1944. Normandy, a crossroads, a roadblock, a field. A convoy from the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion was moving cautiously when it ran into the spearhead of Camp Grub Paper, the infamous SS Armored Battle Group. The Americans were rear echelon troops, radio operators, artillery observers, clerks, not infantry, not equipped to fight tanks and armored infantry. The engagement lasted mere minutes. The Americans surrendered, and then the SS did the unthinkable. They opened fire. Machine guns, pistols, rifles. Men were shot like cattle. Those who tried to run were cut down. Wounded soldiers were finished off with shots to the head. 84 Americans died in the snow that day. 43 survived by playing dead, crawling away hours later, their bodies stiff, their minds numb. Normandy shattered the rules of war, the unspoken code of prisoner treatment. The Geneva Convention evaporated in a moment of cold-blooded brutality. When Funk heard of Normandy, something inside him hardened. He had seen men die in Normandy, in Market Garden. He had seen friends fall in fields and forests across Europe. But Normandy was different. This was murder, not battle. The SS had destroyed any notion of mercy. Funk swore he would never surrender to the Germans, not to the Wehrmacht, not to the SS. Every decision from now on would be colored by this reality. Survival was no longer enough. Resistance was moral. Fighting back was absolute. January 29th, 1945. Holtzheim, Belgium. Funk's Company C had orders to capture the village. But there was a problem. The company was understrength. The executive officer was dead. Funk, now acting as a company executive officer, surveyed the roster. 30 men remained, a mix of frontline soldiers, clerks, cooks, and supply personnel. Most had never fired a shot in anger. Funk didn't hesitate. He formed them into an infantry force. "Grab your weapons. We're taking this village," he said. His calm, unwavering voice inspired confidence. The march to Holtzheim was 15 miles through waist-deep snow, in a blizzard, under German artillery harassment. Funk led from the front, unflinching, setting the pace, setting the tone. When they reached the village, he organized the assault. 15 houses, every one occupied by Germans. Machine guns, rifles, and grenades. Funk and his makeshift platoon cleared them systematically. 30 prisoners were taken with no American casualties. Another unit captured 50 more. 80 prisoners in total were corralled in a farmhouse yard. 4 men were left to guard them. Funk could not anticipate what would happen next. A German patrol, camouflaged in white winter coats, approached. The 4 guards didn't recognize the threat until it was too late. Suddenly, the prisoners were free, armed, and preparing to attack Company C from behind. 90 Germans stood ready, rifles in hand. Funk walked around the corner. The odds were impossible, 90-1. His men disarmed. His life was threatened by an MP40 pressed into his stomach. Every rational choice screamed surrender. And then Funk laughed. January 29th, 1945. Holtzheim, Belgium. Funk rounds a corner of the farmhouse. The snow crunches under his boots. Time seems to slow. 90 Germans stand before him, half armed, half scrambling to grab rifles. His four guard are on their knees, helpless. One other American is beside him, equally exposed. The mathematics of survival is zero. Every rational thought, every trained instinct screams surrender. But Funk doesn't think about survival. He thinks about Malmedy. He thinks about the 84 Americans executed in the snow, men who followed orders, who trusted rules that no longer exist. He thinks about his men scattered across the village, and the consequences if the Germans strike from the rear. And then instinct takes over. He laughs. It's absurd. It's insane. The German officer, a young man with veins bulging and a face red with rage, screams in German. Funk doesn't understand a word. He doesn't need to. The officer is expecting compliance, expecting fear, expecting surrender. Instead, he gets a paratrooper laughing at death. Funk's shoulders shake. His laugh is loud, mocking, defiant. Confusion ripples across the German line. Some soldiers begin to mimic him nervously, unsure whether to fire, freeze, or flee. The officer screams again, louder. Funk laughs harder. And then Funk acts. Slowly at first, slinging his M1A1 Thompson over his shoulder as if he were surrendering. The officer leans forward, believing victory is at hand. Funk's hand closes around the grip. Lightning fast. He swings the Thompson down and opens fire. 30 rounds in seconds. The German officer is struck square in the chest, dead before he hits the ground. Funk pivots, continues firing. Screams erupt. Snow sprays with blood. Brass casings scatter like silver hail across the frozen battlefield. The four guards, inspired by Funk's audacity, scramble for the rifles of fallen Germans. The other American besides Funk fires into the chaos. What was hopeless moments ago becomes a maelstrom of confusion and violence. Germans are hit from multiple directions, unprepared for the sudden reversal. Shouts, gunfire, the clatter of weapons dropping, the smell of cordite in freezing air. Every movement is deliberate, every second counts. Funk doesn't stop. Reloading the Thompson in practice seconds, he fires again, precise and unrelenting. Within 60 seconds, the impossible has occurred. 21 Germans lie dead in the snow. 24 are wounded. The rest, stunned, terrified, throw down their weapons. Their plan to strike Company C from the rear has failed utterly. Funk stands in the center of the carnage, Thompson still smoking, surrounded by chaos and bodies, alive where any rational mind would have expected death. The aftermath is almost surreal. Company C consolidates the village. The prisoners are recaptured and placed under stricter guard. Funk reports to his commanding officer, calm, almost matter-of-fact. Yet the story spreads rapidly through the 82nd Airborne. The sergeant who laughed at 90 Germans and killed 21 becomes a legend overnight. Orders, reports, murmurs in tents and mess halls. The man who walked into impossible odds and survived. The one who refused to surrender. Holtzheim becomes more than a tactical victory. It becomes a symbol. Courage, audacity, and quick thinking are valorized over numbers, firepower, or rigid doctrine. Funk has not only saved lives, his men's his own, but demonstrated the essence of leadership under extreme conditions. Later, in Washington, the Medal of Honor citation will describe his actions succinctly. Refusing to surrender, Sergeant Funk single-handedly engaged and neutralized enemy forces, saving his company from potential annihilation. But in the moment, there is no recognition, no medals, no headlines. There is only snow, blood, smoke, and the echo of laughter that became a weapon as deadly as any rifle. Funk's decision, illogical to some, instinctive to him, turns the tide. He has done the impossible. He laughed in the face of certain death and lived to tell the tale. recognition, and quiet valor. The snow was still thick in Holtzheim, the air heavy with smoke and cordite. Funk's men had secured the village. The surviving Germans had been corralled under stricter guard, their weapons confiscated, their plans to strike Company C thwarted. Yet even as the adrenaline faded, Funk didn't pause to celebrate. There were still scattered skirmishes in other parts of the village, other soldiers to account for, and the relentless winter pressing down on the Allies. Leadership, Funk knew, meant action even after chaos. News of the Holtzheim firefight spread fast through the regiment and the 82nd Airborne Division. Men whispered about the sergeant who had walked into almost certain death, laughed while a gun was pressed to his stomach, and emerged victorious. Stories of his courage traveled from the front lines to headquarters. Officers marveled at his audacity, the cold, calculating decisiveness that had turned an impossible situation into survival and victory. Soldiers who had served alongside Funk called it the most insane act of combat they had ever witnessed, yet it was executed with absolute precision. Back at the division command, Funk filed his report. He wrote with the same steady hand he'd used as a clerk before the war, but the words conveyed something far greater than routine duty. He described the circumstances clearly, without embellishment. Numbers, positions, timing, casualties. There was no bragging. Funk did not see himself as extraordinary. He saw the mission, his men, and the necessity to act. For Funk, it was a day like many others in the war, brutal, chaotic, dangerous, but a duty that demanded action. In Washington, however, the significance of Holtzheim could not be understated. The Medal of Honor recommendation moved quickly through channels. Witness reports, officer statements, and Funk's own calm recounting of events made the nomination unassailable. The award citation would later describe him as outnumbered, confronted with enemy fire and impossible odds. He refused to surrender, engaged the enemy with deadly accuracy, and led his men to success. It was a testament not only to his courage, but to the intelligence, foresight, and leadership that had guided him through years of combat. September 5th, 1945. The White House. President Harry Truman himself placed a Medal of Honor around Funk's neck. The photograph captured a small, unassuming man, 5 feet 5 inches, 140 pounds, standing quietly yet proudly, a Medal of Honor gleaming against his uniform. Truman's words echoed the magnitude of Funk's service. "I would rather have this medal than be President of the United States." It was more than recognition. It was an acknowledgement that courage does not measure by size, rank, or fame. It is measured by action under impossible circumstances. Yet Funk's story did not end with medals. Unlike some war heroes who paraded their fame, gave speeches, or wrote memoirs, Funk returned to Pennsylvania. He resumed his work in the Veterans Administration, the same quiet, meticulous bureaucracy he had known before the war. Here, he continued serving others, helping veterans navigate the complex system of benefits, claims, and pensions. The battlefield had taught him leadership, resilience, and responsibility. The VA allowed him to apply those lessons in peacetime, quietly shaping lives and ensuring service members received what they deserved. Throughout his life, Funk avoided fame. While others sought recognition, lectures, or political platforms, he remained rooted in ordinary life. He married, raised a family, and continued his public service. Yet the legacy of Holtzheim and his extraordinary acts in World War II followed him quietly, like a shadow, respected, remembered by those who served with him, studied by military historians, but largely unknown to the broader public. Funk embodied a rare combination: immense heroism paired with humility, courage tempered with quiet duty, and valor expressed not for glory but for necessity. Even in retirement, Funk's presence commanded respect. The men who had fought with him, survived because of him, and witnessed his audacity never forgot. He became a living testament to the principle that true leadership is not measured by accolades but by the lives one protects, the decisions one makes under pressure, and the moral courage to act when the world demands impossible choices. Holtzheim, Malmedy, Normandy, Holland. They were not just battles. They were defining moments where Funk's character shaped history in small, extraordinary increments. Legacy of a quiet hero. Leonard Alfred Funk Jr. lived the rest of his life in the rhythm of quiet service. After decades of combat, He found peace not in applause or recognition, but in the steady cadence of ordinary life. The war had demanded everything from him: courage, endurance, decisiveness, leadership under fire. And yet, when the battles were over, Funk did not seek fame. He returned to Pennsylvania, to the town where smokestacks once lined the Monongahela River, and resumed a life that, on the surface, seemed mundane. He worked at the Veterans Administration, navigating bureaucracy, helping fellow soldiers obtain the benefits they had earned. It was, in its own way, a continuation of the battlefield. Funk understood that serving others required vigilance, patience, and steadfastness, whether under artillery fire or amidst endless paperwork. Through the years, Funk remained modest. Medals hung quietly in cases, citations recorded in official files, but he never flaunted them. The Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Hearts, Distinguished Service Cross, and the Medal of Honor, all symbols of extraordinary valor, did not define him. What defined Funk was the principle behind the acts: the refusal to surrender when faced with impossible odds, the choice to act decisively for the lives of others, and the clarity of purpose that allowed him to navigate chaos and survive where many would perish. His story became a quiet legend within the 82nd Airborne Division, whispered among soldiers and recounted in training, a standard of courage for those who would follow. Yet Funk's heroism transcends medals and accolades. It lies in the example he set, that courage is measured not by size, strength, or public recognition, but by action in moments when hesitation can mean death, not just for oneself, but for those entrusted to your care. At Holtzheim, facing 90 armed Germans with a gun pressed to his stomach, Funk's laugh was more than a human reaction. It was a calculated defiance, a moment of psychological mastery that allowed him to regain control of the impossible. That laughter, followed by lightning-fast action, saved lives, repelled the enemy, and left an indelible mark on the annals of history. Over time, his story reached beyond the military. Students of leadership, historians, and strategists studied his actions to understand decision-making under pressure, the power of momentum, and the effectiveness of initiative in asymmetric circumstances. Funk's life became a testament to the truth that real heroes are not always loud or famous. Often, they are the quiet individuals whose choices ripple far beyond what anyone could predict. He embodied the principle that bravery combined with intelligence and tempered by humility can alter history in ways that sheer force cannot. Funk passed away on November 20th, 1992, in Braddock Hills, Pennsylvania, at the age of 76. He was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery, Section 35, Grave 23734, among the heroes of every American war. His passing marked the end of a life lived with extraordinary courage, yet his legacy continues. The paratrooper who laughed in the face of certain death is remembered through a fitness center at Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, a highway in Pennsylvania, and a post office in McKeesport. Silent monuments to a man who never sought the spotlight. For those who study history, leadership, or human resilience, Leonard Funk remains an enduring example. Courage is not about fearlessness, and heroism is not about grandeur. It is about thinking clearly when chaos reigns, acting decisively when the odds are impossible, and protecting others when survival seems improbable. From Normandy to Holland, from Malmedy to Holtzheim, Funk's life demonstrates that real valor is a combination of intellect, moral clarity, and unwavering resolve. In a world that often celebrates flash and spectacle, Funk reminds us that true heroism is quiet, disciplined, and selfless. The short, unassuming paratrooper from Pennsylvania, a man who started as a store clerk, changed the course of battles, saved dozens of lives, and left a legacy that echoes far beyond the battlefield. And perhaps the most remarkable lesson of all, sometimes a single act of courage, even in the absurdity of war, can turn the impossible into the unforgettable. Leonard Funk laughed at death and, in doing so, taught the world what it truly means to be brave.